Hello everyone. So I finally have like a little bit of time to shoot this, and I wanted to shoot this before I forgot things. So basically, if you've been following me, you know that I had my baby early at 35 weeks, baby Illusia Angelina. And there was a lot that happened before that because I've kind of been on hiatus from Instagram for the last like 3 weeks, I think, until we had the surprise birth. So I'm just going to say everything that happened and, you know, my thoughts and everything that happened. Here's my story. I hope you guys like it. So let's cut to the point. I'm sorry, I'm like going off like 3 hours sleep because I'm here and I'm there and I've got like, I had 2 kids in hospital at one stage. So anyway, let's do it. So basically, if you're following my better half, Chris Angel, you know that he got COVID at the end of October. Literally 3 days later, I tested positive for COVID. Christopher is vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Me and the kids are not. My decision to not be vaccinated was literally just down to the fact that I was pregnant and 75% of other pregnant women didn't get vaccinated. It's a really like scary place to be in when people are saying get vaccinated. We don't actually know what it's going to do to your baby, and don't get vaccinated because of all this. Like, it's just a really scary place to be in. So my family's decision was that I wouldn't get vaccinated, at least until after I had my baby. So the vaccinated person in my house, Christopher, he's not the only vaccinated person in my house, but he was the first one to get COVID. We put him in quarantine. Me and the kids stayed away from him. And surely enough, 3 days later, I tested positive. 2 days after that, Illusia tested positive. My parents tested positive, and Johnny tested positive. Yes, my cancer child tested positive for COVID. So before I get into all that, basically I quarantined from the kids when I found out that I was positive for COVID. I stayed in the bedroom and my kids went to stay in the casita with my parents.
It's a weird thing, huh? You could give Daddy a cuddle on Friday.
My parents are the best people in the world. Like, I don't know what I would have done with any of what has happened without them. I'm just really freaking lucky. I'm like still really emotional because I just gave birth not long ago. But anyway, so I was doing really fine with COVID. Like, I literally felt really tired the first 2 days and I just slept. Everything was fine. And then by the 4th day, I felt better. I cleaned my shower. I like did all these things. And then when Illusia tested positive, he came straight into the bedroom with me, and I started looking after him. And then everything kind of, you know, went downhill from there. Obviously, my parents tested positive and Johnny tested positive. So I brought both kids into the bedroom with me.
Can you just come here?
And my parents stayed in the casita. By this time, Christopher had already tested negative. 5 days after he tested positive, he was negative. We checked it like 10 times. He was negative. He did Regeneron in the hospital straight away. When my parents got it, we put them into the hospital to do Regeneron straight away. And I was really withdrawn. I was like, I'm pregnant, but I don't actually know. Like, I take a prenatal vitamin. That's it. Like, I didn't even take Tylenol. Like, I've had the most low risk pregnancy. So I didn't want to take Regeneron because it is a blood product. And we had planned to keep Illusia's stem cells and cord blood for Johnny Christopher. Cancer patients actually have like a sibling connection where we get to do that for a very, very low price. So we did that with Illusia's, and I had planned to do that with Illusia's. So I said no to Regeneron, and I said I'd just, get through it. So we put me on zinc and vitamin D, and obviously Tylenol to counter the fevers. So I was having I had a fever the second night. I was really tired, and everything was fine. When I got the kids, I was able to look after them. They were fine. They just had a fever one day, and then Christos Yanni literally the next day was absolutely fine. He had a cough. Johnny, I called his oncologist. I told him Johnny's just tested positive, and he's like, that's okay. Johnny had IVIG a couple of weeks ago. He should be fine. We find that leukemia patients actually do quite well with this. There's no need to bring him in the hospital. You can give him Tylenol for his fever, and we'll hold off his next immune therapy hookup for a week. And I was like, okay. So Johnny was literally fine, guys. Johnny was amazing with COVID. Christos, amazing with COVID. My parents had Regeneron literally 24 hours later, fine. It was fine. I hit day 7, and the cough started. And being pregnant and coughing, it's so intense. It got to the point where I was coughing so bad that Johnny started to panic seeing me cough. He's like, Mommy, you're not breathing. So he called my dad on FaceTime on his iPad. He called my dad and he said, Mommy's not breathing good. So then Christopher found out. We called the doctor, Dr. George, who is absolutely amazing. He was amazing through this whole thing. He would come to the house and test us all. Basically, he said, you need to go to hospital, but you need to go to the hospital that you're delivering at. And so I did. So I went to the hospital that I was delivering at. Christopher took me. Obviously, he has great immune now because he got COVID, he was vaccinated, so he was fine to take me. Basically, they did an x-ray of my lungs, and my lungs had some spots on them that they were just like, we're gonna clear it with steroids. So they put me on steroids. They made me stay a night in the hospital. And, it was a rough night. I could hardly breathe. They put me on oxygen because they were worried. Every time my oxygen would drop, they were worried about the baby. So they put me on oxygen. It was weird because I'm a really healthy 30-year-old that works out. But my OB came to talk to me, and she's like, she had already explained to me that a few other women that are around 35, 36 weeks had contracted COVID, and a lot of them gave birth too early, which kind of stuck in my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't have this baby early. So anyway, I had to stay a night in the hospital. Christopher had to go to do his shows and obviously work. He's in the middle of doing another show right now, so he's busy as ever. And it was a rough night, and then they had the baby monitored the whole night, and she was moving like crazy. She was great, her heart rate was great, everything was fine, and I was on oxygen, so we were able to get her oxygen. The infectious health guy came to me the next day, and he's like, because I spiked a couple of fevers during my hospital stay. It was so weird. I got so cold that I was crying for blankets. I said to the nurse, I need more blankets. They're like, honey, we can't give you any more blankets because you're going to overheat, and we need you to break this fever. By this time I was on the steroids. In the morning I woke up, and the infectious health doctor came to me, and he's like, look, I put pregnant women on this drug called remdesivir. And, it's been really good for them. There's no blood products, your cord blood, everything will be fine. And I was so out of it. I was just like, okay, what does my OB say? Is it okay for the baby? And he's like, yep, it's fine for the baby. I know your doctor really well. She actually delivered my baby. And so I said, okay. So they hooked me up to remdesivir. And guys, by this point, I was so out of it. I didn't even think. I fell asleep when they hooked up the remdesivir, and they gave me 1 dose of remdesivir. So remdesivir, you're meant to get over 5 days, a dose of it every day. It's an antiviral medication that they used for HIV or something. I did my research after the fact. So it was fine. I went home. My oxygen levels were looking good, so I went home. And my parents had my kids, and everyone was doing really good. Everyone was doing amazing. Even the kids were doing amazing. Johnny got a cough, and his fevers were gone by day 2. My parents were great. My dad's pushing 70. That Regeneron really did wonders for him. He's like, the first day I thought I was going to die, but the second day I was fine. So I'm trying to keep this as like condensed as possible, but sharing as much as I can. So I went home. My dad picked me up because Christopher was doing a show, and I went home and I rested. It killed me to do this, but like, for some reason, my body just knew I had to pack my hospital bag. I hadn't packed my hospital bag, hadn't done any of that. And I was like, I need to do this. So I pushed through and I packed my hospital bag. I washed all the baby clothes. I had everything ready. I was like, okay, I just need to be ready. I cleaned up the whole house. Like I cleaned everything that I could. I even organized my pantry. And by this time I had started having tightenings. And like, I mean, the first time I gave birth, and I will post my son's birth stories. The first time I didn't know I was in labor. So I feel like I might have a pretty high pain threshold because I was having tightenings, but they weren't bothering me. I have a Doppler, so every time, you know, I was worried about the baby, I'd just check her heartbeat and she was fine. So I'd finished all my washing, I finished all my tidying and cleaning, and I would go and rest. I'd try and nap and I'd have tightening. So the first night I called the doctor on call and she's like, you know what, just take a bath, take a rest, you'll be fine. It could just be Braxton Hicks and, you know, it could be triggered by all the trauma you've had with the cough. And I was like, okay, I wasn't worried. The next day, I did more cleaning and more tidying. I like prepped all the baby toys and everything. Like I literally had my house baby ready. That I felt really content and really happy. So that night, I was making soup for dinner. My kids were still with my parents. And I actually booked my maternity shoot with a photographer. I was texting her and I was like, hey, let's do the maternity shoot on this date. I'm getting better from COVID and everything's good. I'd like to do it before the baby comes. And so we booked it in. We booked it in that night. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, went to bed. I was still having tightenings. And then at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and the tightenings were waking me up. And that's when I was like, oh, something funky's happening. So I went on the couch, that couch there, and I got my Doppler and I sat and I just listened to her heartbeat. I found it straight away, no worries. And then when I'd have a tightening, her heartbeat would just disappear or slow down. And I'd be like, is that my heartbeat? So it would go from like 160 or 140 to like 80. And I was like, 80 would be my heartbeat. So I'd be like, oh, she must move. And then I'd have another tightening. And I was like, okay, no, something's up. So I called the labor and delivery ward and I was like, hey, I'm having tightenings, but they're waking me up now. And the nurse was amazing. She's like, honey, just come in. It doesn't matter. Just come in. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll come in. So I put on my pants, I put on my bag, and I look at my hospital bags. I look at them, I'm like, I'm not going to bring them, but they're ready to go if I need them. So I drive myself at 1 o'clock in the morning. Christopher was still quarantining because I still had COVID, and my parents were with the boys in the casita. So I didn't bother to wake anyone or text anyone because I was just like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just go. I don't want to bother anyone. So I drove myself to the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I had one contraction on the way. I was listening to Doja Cat and like I was like having a contraction. And I was like, oh, I'm good. Like I'm fine. It's fine. I get there, I park, and I left my phone in the car, and then I started to have a contraction walking into the door. Had the contraction, walked back, grabbed my phone, and then went up to the labor and delivery ward. I get up there, the nurses are amazing up there. Like I just have this profound like respect and love for nurses. Like they're just amazing people. I told them about my COVID stuff. I said, I'm at day 10 with COVID or whatever it was. And they're like, oh, okay, whatever. So they get me in there and she's like, okay, just get undressed for me and we'll get you hooked up. And I was like, okay. So I went to get undressed, and sorry if this is TMI, but I like went to take off my underwear and I was bleeding. And I was like, oh shit, I'm losing my freaking mucus plug or whatever it is. And I was like, this is not happening. I'm like, this baby's going to come. And I knew it instantly. I knew it. I instantly knew this baby's coming. So I told her, I was like, oh, I didn't take off my underwear because I'm bleeding. And she's like, okay, let's get you hooked up quick. So she hooks me up to the monitor and checks the baby. And as soon as she hears the heartbeat and I'm like, okay, here, I'm having a contraction now. And I'm talking through them fine. And she's like, okay, the heart rate's dropping. So we need you know what, let me just check you. So she did a check and she's like, okay, you're 3 centimeters dilated. And I was like, oh my God. So I've been laboring the last 2 days. I didn't even freaking know. Typical Chanel. Happened with my first one. So yeah, so she's like, okay, we need to call your doctor right now. So they called the doctor that was on call. It wasn't my OB. I do have my OB cell, but I'm one of those people, I don't want to bother people. So it was another doctor, Dr. Freeman, that was on at the time. And I'd never met her, but she was at the clinic that I go to, the facility that I go to for women. Yeah, basically, they're like, honey, by the way this heart rate's going, you're going to have an emergency C-section. We need to get this baby out now. Who's going to be with you? And I was like, oh, my better half, baby daddy. So she's like, okay, you need to call him now because your doctor's going to be here in 20 minutes. And I was like, oh my God. So I call Chris, I wake him up and he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, hey, I'm at the hospital. And he goes, why are you at the hospital? Why didn't you wake me? The only person I had told before that, I'd texted my sister in Australia and said, hey, I'm going to the hospital, I'm having weird tightenings. And she's like, you need to call mum and dad or Chris or someone. I ignored that. So I called Chris and I told him, and I'm like, hey, I'm at the hospital, this baby's coming, you need to get here now. And he's like, what? And I'm like, you need to bring my hospital bags too. And he's like half asleep. Anyway, he gets all my stuff and he speeds down the highway and gets to the hospital. And in that time, I called my dad and woke him up and told him and said, hey, the baby's coming. They're going to give me an emergency C-section. He's like, what? And he was so mad at me that I hadn't called him and told him. And I was like, I'm sorry, I just didn't want to wake anyone. I didn't know. So anyway, that was it. Like everything kind of just sped through from this point on. Like the nurses are like, trying to do the COVID precautions and having to gown up, but they know they need to get this done. So they're in there with masks, like not even worrying about themselves. And they get my IV hooked up, they get me all ready. And then the doctor comes, Christopher comes, and it's just a rush from there. They take me straight to the operating room and they're telling me I'm going to get my spinal. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's something that happens when you get a C-section. So one nurse, she comes up, she's not even gowned up because this needs to happen now. They're like, honey, we need to get this out. We need to get this baby out now. Because she was in such distress that her heart rate would go from 160 to 80, like every contraction. And I was having contractions every 10 minutes. So time was of the essence. So the nurse comes over, she holds me. She completely holds me. She's only wearing a mask. Like she's not gowned up or anything. I'm like, I'm so sorry. You're probably going to get COVID. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm going to be fine. And she's like, don't worry. And she's the sweetest nurse ever. And she's just holding me. And I just think of my son, Johnny, because he gets lumbar punctures all the time. And I'm like, if Johnny can hold still, I can hold still. Easy. So yeah. So we do the spinal. They numb me. They put it in. I don't know. I didn't even think of it. I was on such an adrenaline high. I didn't even think of it. It didn't hurt at all. And then all of a sudden they just lift up my legs and I'm like, that's my leg and you're moving it. And then I'm on the operating table. They put the catheter in. They just whip up my clothes and I'm like, there's everyone in the room. So there's no such thing as shame for me. Like I don't even think about it anymore.
So I'm here at the hospital and it's about 4:13 a.m. November 5th, 2021. Chanel is dilating and is going into labor. We're doing a C-section and God willing, everything goes well.
The doctor's prepping me up and they're like, testing. And I'm like, I don't feel anything. Literally didn't feel anything from here down. Like it was the weirdest thing. And I'm so lucky that I was able to experience 2 natural births. So getting a C-section was actually really cool to me. So then I'm laying there with Christopher. We're just talking. We're just trying to relax. We're just trying to be in the moment. And obviously my biggest stress is the baby. Like I just want her to be okay. So they start doing all the stuff and I can feel the pushing and the pressure and you know, only if I feel like only women with C-sections understand what that feels like. It's the weirdest feeling. It's just a gross feeling. I had so much shoulder pain because of all the air that goes up into your body that the anesthesiologist just started giving me like whatever to like shut me up. But anyway, so I'm like sitting there stressing about the baby, and then they pull her out, and I'm like asking the anesthesiologist, I'm like, what do you see? What's going on? Well, she's not crying. We don't hear anything. And I hear the doctor say, oh, she's got double cord around her neck. So she had the cord wrapped around her neck twice.
Breathe.
Oh my gosh, look over
Breathe.
Come on.
Is she okay? Breathe.
Squirming around.
She's moving.
Wrapped around her neck.
She had the cord around her.
Is she okay?
Takes them a second to find her.
What do you have for time?
4:12 in the room, 4:34 for delivery.
What do I need her at? 33 for you?
Yes, she's okay.
34 for delivery.
Is she okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Please, I'm gonna stand back here this side. They're just getting all that fluid out of her.
Okay. Okay. She's gonna be okay. They said she's okay. She had the cord wrapped around. She had the cord wrapped around her.
That's not good.
No, she'll be okay.
And then they go bring her over to the thing. And it felt like the longest wait of my life because I hadn't heard her cry. And I'm asking Christopher, I'm asking everyone, I'm like, what's going on? Why is she not crying? And then the anesthesiologist was like, she's wriggling, she's moving, don't worry, she's good. And then all of a sudden we hear her cry. And like nothing can, like, that was like just so reassuring to me, just hearing her cry. But I knew still that there was going to be a lot of stuff because she was only 35 weeks.
What is that?
Is that a baby? Is that a baby? Is she crying?
Sounds good.
I just booked my maternity shoot.
She's pretty chill, huh? Don't kids usually scream when they come out?
Well, it depends. Every kid's different.
Yeah.
She's only 35 weeks, love.
And I just keep thinking back, and I was just so happy that I heard her cry, but I just kept asking, is she okay? And they're like, don't worry, we're going to bring her over. We're going to bring her over to you. And then they brought Chris over to her, and I said, yes, bring her, because they're still operating on me, getting all the layers back down and all that stuff. And I was just in pain, like, because of the air, and so the anesthesiologist kept giving me more stuff.
I mean, if she wasn't doing okay, they'd be able to make a lot more noise over there.
Okay.
So, they're just sectioning stuff out. A lot of times when babies are born C-section, because they don't have the benefit of being squeezed a lot when they go through the birth canal, they have a little bit more fluid on their lungs, so it just takes them a little bit of time to transition. We call it transition.
Yeah.
Over on this side, you can see the little thing.
4'7".
How many pounds?
Congratulations.
Is she okay?
Yeah, she's doing okay. She's not screaming and crying. And,
Why is that?
and
Is
super
she
video.
premature?
Yeah, probably.
Is she okay though?
Yeah, she's doing okay. Her oxygen levels are good, so we're just kind of giving her a little bit of breathing support. This is just CPAP, just because of pressure.
Right.
This kind of helps hold her lungs open a little bit.
Hey, Illusia.
What's her name?
Illusia Angelina. Illusia for illusion, being magic.
And Chris was over with the baby and he's talking. I can hear him talking to her, so I knew that she was looking at him or alert or something.
Look how beautiful you are. Hi, baby.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
You're gonna go right there above the plant.
Above, right here, right?
Yep. Yep.
Right there? Ready? One,
Perfect.
2, 3.
Awesome.
That'll work.
And he came over and he's like, love, she's beautiful. She's beautiful. Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. I'm like, I just want to see her. I want to see her. And while they're like stitching me up and whatever, they finally bring her over to me. And she's like wrapped up and she's got this giant hat on her head. And I'm like, she's so tiny. And my whole heart just shattered because it felt like she wasn't moving. And I was like, I was panicking. Like, I can't tell you like the panic I felt. I felt so much panic. And I'm like, what? I'm like, she's so little. She was 4 pounds, 13 ounces, like tiny little thing, 17 inches long.
Are you sure?
What's the matter? Here's the baby right there.
She's so tiny. Oh my God.
There you go. There's the baby.
Honey. She's so tiny.
She's a little over 4 pounds.
And they just said, we're taking her to the NICU. The neonatologist, that's what he is, came over and he's like, don't worry, we've got her on the breathing thing. We're going to take her straight to the NICU now. And we'll let you know what's going to happen. So then they stitch me up. They bring me back to the room and I'm just knackered. I'm completely knackered. I'm so tired. By this time it was 4 o'clock in the morning. So 4:34 she was born at in the morning on November 5th. And yeah, so I'm in the room with Christopher and I'm just talking to him. Like, I'm like, what did she do when she got out? Like, I'm asking him every question I can about Illusia and what she was doing when she came out. Like, he took videos and he showed me the video, and there was only, I don't know, in the heat of the moment, he mustn't have pressed record because everything happened so quickly. And before that, while they were stitching me up, actually, I should mention, I had to ask them. I was like, oh wait, what about the cord blood? What about the placenta? Because I was keeping my placenta too for encapsulation, and I had the boxes there. And so one of the nurses ran out and grabbed it, and the doctor was like, I'm so sorry, but there wouldn't have been enough cord blood. I can only get you the tissue. And so we just went with that. But Christopher was so upset about that, and I just was so out of it that I didn't even think of it, like, because this all happened in the space of 20 minutes. Like, they had to get the baby out, that we weren't even able to get the cord blood for Johnny. And that shattered us, because, like, you know, how often do you have kids and how often do you get a match so that the sibling could be a match to potentially save your other child's future. Even though Johnny is completely in remission and doing amazing, I like to have the backup. And I was happy because I had Christosiani's backup, but we still were able to save the cord tissue and then the placenta. So that was a mess. That was a mess, but you know, it happens. Like, we had to get Illusia out. That was more important. So anyway, I was in the room and I was just asking questions, and by this time, you know, Christopher and I were trying to take a nap. Like, we were trying to rest. The neonatologist had switched over. So another neonatologist had come into us and said, look, we need to do full body cooling because I'm worried that Illusia's APGAR scores were quite low. So the APGAR score is what they take when the baby comes out, when they're born. You know, how much movement, how alert they are, their muscle tone, all that stuff. And so the 1 minute one was 4, the 5 minute one was 7, and the 10 minute one was 7. So this neonatologist was like, she doesn't meet the criteria, but she's borderline to do full body cooling for the brain. But he's like, I'm opting on the side of doing it because the risks outweigh the benefits. And so we just looked at each other and we're like, okay, let's do it. Do whatever you need to do to make sure our daughter's good. I was trying to process what he was saying to me, but I couldn't. So basically they said to me they would cool her for 72 hours. So they drop her body temperature from 36, 37 to 33. They drop it by 3 degrees. This is Celsius, which works for me because I'm an Aussie. Basically, we're told that she would be in a little, on a cooling thing for 72 hours, which was really scary because obviously my main thing is, what does that mean? A low APGAR score could affect her. They talk about cerebral palsy and all those things. And that was my fear because I remember her in my belly. I remember the 2 days before she came out after I got out of the hospital. I remember going, oh, she's not been as active as usual. Little did I know that it was because the cord was wrapped around her neck, that she was just still because every time I'd have a tightening, it would choke her, basically. It was choking her. Every time I'd have a tightening or a contraction, she was being choked in my womb. So we went with the cooling, and obviously they found out that she was jaundice, which is pretty common for premature babies. And she was also Coombs positive, which means her blood type is A and my blood type is O. And basically my blood was sending little soldiers to attack her blood. And yeah, so that was scary. So they put her under the light therapy, and they had her on morphine to keep her comfortable while they cooled her body for 72 hours. So I'm going to make a separate video of our NICU stay and everything that Illusia's going through. Obviously we're 11 days now. I'm actually on my way to go see her and do her next feed, but I wanted to shoot this before I forgot everything. So yeah, so basically they went it straight and did that. And my concern was that I wasn't going to be able to see her because of the COVID precautions. And they said because I was 10 days, there was no precautions because technically, according to the CDC, after 10 days, you're no longer contagious. And they were happy for me to go see her. And so after 6 hours of Googling cooling and APGAR scores and cerebral palsy, no nap, I was able to go and see her on a wheelchair. They took me in to see her, and she was in a little incubator.
Yeah, you can get a picture. She's like looking for, she's like, feet, I can eat.
Get some, mommy.
I know you already pumped.
Yeah.
You had a swab. Good.
And it was really hard. Because I couldn't hold her. And I just felt like it was my fault, like, for accepting the remdesivir and getting COVID and everything, that she was in there. But then I was like, guys, my OB came to talk to me and she said, we think that COVID can bring on labor early. It messes with the placenta. So, I don't know if it saved her life, because how would I have known that the cord was wrapped around her neck? But whatever sent me into labor early, it brought my baby out early, and she's doing amazing. She's doing really good. But I don't know what it was. I don't know if COVID brought on my labor early, if the remdesivir did it, if the steroids did it. But the cord was wrapped around her neck, so if this pregnancy had progressed, God knows what would have happened to her. I'm just so thankful that she is here and she's alive. She's, doing amazing. I'm going to go with her story in another video, so you guys will know more about that. But we're looking at bringing her home soon, and she's doing amazing. She's off her breathing tube. She's a feisty little girl. She is her mother's daughter. She made a huge entrance. She's in every freaking news article. Just like me, I was in the paper. I was born on my mom's birthday and I was in the paper the day I was born. But yeah, so we don't know what brought this on, but it's a scary position to be in when you're pregnant. And I don't know if COVID saved my baby. I don't know if remdesivir saved my baby, but she needed to get out at 35 weeks because of that nuchal cord, that double nuchal cord. So anyway, I was in the hospital for 2 nights. I was already walking around by hour 8 because I wanted to see my baby. I wanted to get good and healthy for my baby. I only took ibuprofen when I needed it, which was, you know, for a bit. And yeah, I was able to get out on Sunday after she was born. She was born on the Friday, and leaving on the Sunday was the hardest thing because I'd go to see her in the NICU and I just had to walk down the hall. And I was pumping. My milk supply is great. I have really great milk supply. But I think the hardest part was coming home on the Sunday without my baby. It was hard being in the postpartum ward because I'd see women and hear their babies, and my baby was in the NICU. It was, I give it to all the women that have to go through premature babies and don't have their baby with them. It's really, really hard. And my other 2 babies are at home with my parents. No one's allowed to visit Illusia except for me and Christopher because that's the COVID rules. Yeah, the hardest thing, I came home on the Sunday and I just sat on the bed and I cried. I cried because my baby was not with me. And I could watch her. The NICU at the hospital I'm at is amazing. You have little cameras so you can watch them anytime. They tell you the feed times that they do. Yeah, I'm 11 days now. I feel great. My scar's tiny. And I go to see Illusia every day. I set Johnny up with his schoolwork. He's still testing positive, even though he has no symptoms. I set him up with his schoolwork to do with Granddad. He does his schoolwork. I, you know, try to spend as much time with them as I can to get to the hospital to be with Illusia for her feeds. Yeah, so I'll talk about Illusia's story and everything. But yeah, that's my birth story, my premature birth story. My 35-week premature baby, who, thank God, is doing amazing. And I just want to say a thank you to all the nurses and the doctors on the labor delivery ward, on the postpartum ward, on the NICU ward. I can't thank you enough. I have so much respect for you all, and I'm just so thankful that my daughter is here and she is alive because of the amazing quick thinking of all of the people on that night. So yeah, that is my birth story. I hope it wasn't too much, and I'm glad I finally was able to film it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching.